It's been described as an archaeological treasure trove, Roman mosaics and buildings found under a farmer's field in Rutland. It was first discovered during the coronavirus lockdown in 2020, but archaeologists have uncovered more and more since. The location is being kept secret and it's now been covered back up to preserve it. Phil Mackey was given exclusive access to the dig during the summer.
After a millennium and a half, a Roman home has emerged from the soil. This is part of the Rutland villa complex first discovered by the landowner's son 2 years ago. Last year they started digging and found this amazing mosaic depicting a scene from Homer's Iliad. Nothing like it had ever been found in Britain before. They also used ground-penetrating radar to survey the entire field and saw many more buildings.
It's divided into 3 rooms, and each room would have had its own temperature. So this room is what's known as the caldarium.
This summer, archaeologists returned and uncovered much, much more.
Just gobsmacked, really. I mean, this is not the sort of survival of archaeology that we expect in a rural situation. This is complete one-off, really, I think. You know, just by finding the mosaic, as we did a couple of years ago, it's amazing.
So this is one of the buildings that is part of a much larger villa complex. This is the living room here. That is the fireplace, and you can still see the charred remains of a fire that must have been lit 1700 years ago. And what this site does is it gives a much greater insight into life at a period about which we know very little, and will give a greater understanding of what life was like in Roman Britain. The field is literally filled with Roman rubble, roof tiles, pottery and masonry. And they found another mosaic with an intricate pattern, a way for the family who owned it to show off their wealth.
It's amazing. I mean, it sort of makes up for all the muddy ditches that I've spent a lot of my time in. Just being able to work on something like this, it kind of brings you a lot closer to the people that were living here, really, you know, and you're sort of experiencing the same kind of things that they would have been looking at every day. So it really does bring it to life for you.
They think the site's possibly 100 years older than previously thought, although the mosaics were added much later in the 5th century, a last blast of Roman Britain. Phil Mackey, BBC News, Rutland.
Well, joining me now is archaeologist and ancient historian Gillian Hovell. Welcome. How special is this find?
For decades and decades and decades, because you've got not just the mosaic, which is fantastic in itself, but we've got the entire estate. We have the boundary wall that goes around it and all of the buildings within it, and that's so rare to get the entire context and the chance to see how it developed over the centuries without it having been largely disturbed by later buildings. So it's a very rare chance indeed to get a proper glimpse of how not only a snapshot in time, but the actual story of the villa.
And so what have you learned?
Well, because we can take modern science to it, we know that we can do more environmental tests on it, as opposed to many villas that were found long time ago. So we know that there was a lot of grain going on in there, which we sort of knew that lots of the estates were grain growing places. Maybe that's true here beyond the boundary, we don't know. But it's a wonderful, wonderful glimpse through that mosaic especially, that even not just Latin literature, but Greek literature, which was the foundation for Roman literature, was known even in Midland Britain, even away from the shores of the coast, away from the continent, and that they were showing off their Roman culture and their knowledge. This is a house built to impress, especially in those later years.
So how much of a revelation is that about the knowledge of literature?
Well, in Britain, we've had one mosaic which said about Virgil's Aeneid, which was the Latin version of Homer, and that we know they were learning on Hadrian's Wall as little schoolboys, writing out their lines. But to have the Greek Homer version, or it may even be a dramatised later version because it shows the weighing of Hector as a ransom, and that's not in Homer. So it's showing a complicated knowledge of literature. And not only that, you've got it in your dining room where you have guests who are coming in and they've got the wow factor. They go, gosh, that's an expensive mosaic. And you might have somebody singing Homer or perhaps doing a little dramatisation going on. You've got a literary circle an educated literary circle, and this patron is showing off in his house, which is how it was done in the later Roman times.
And now it's being covered back over to protect it. Why is that? Does that mean it'll be covered over and not to be seen again?
Oh, it's unlikely it won't be seen again, but because they've had a certain length of time to do an excavation, to take samples and to conserve everything they find. But very sadly, when there is a rich Roman site, very sadly, many people come in to thieve with metal detectors, and they'll take a coin out of it, and that coin might be our only dating evidence for a room. So if you remove items from an archaeological site, it might buy you a few pounds on the market, but it's lost all of the value of that room. And we just don't know more about it, about how people lived in it. So they have to be kept pretty secret. I know the locals will know it, but it's not advertised widely. And if you bury it back again, it's much harder to get into it. So it's covered for its own protection, and it is a protected site now because it's so important. But I'm sure they'll be coming back to it in the future at some point because it's such an important site.
Gillian Hovell, the muddy archaeologist, thank you.
Thank you very much.